The video on the About This Course page explained a little bit about what research literacy is and why we care. I want to expand on that a bit though, so you have more context for the rest of the materials and the assignments. It might seem a little unusual to start an explanation of research literacy with an essay about a pasture, but bear with me. This is part of an essay where the author, Wendell Berry, talks about turning a piece of land into a pasture. In the first section, he wrote, I have a steep wooded hillside that I wanted to be able to pasture occasionally, but it had no permanent water supply. About halfway to the top of the slope, there's a narrow bench on which I thought I could make a small pond. I hired a man with a bulldozer to dig one. He cleared away the trees and then formed the pond, cutting into the hill on the upper side, piling the loosened dirt and curving earthwork on the lower. The pond appeared to be a success. Before the bulldozer quit work, water had already begun to seep in. Soon there was enough to support a few head of stock. To heal the exposed ground, I fertilized it and sowed it with grass and clover. We had an extremely wet fall and winter, with the usual freezing and thawing. The ground grew heavy with water and soft. The earthwork slumped. A large slice of the wooded floor on the upper side slipped down into the pond. The trouble was the familiar one. Too much power, too little knowledge. The fault was mine. I was careful to get expert advice, but this only exemplifies what I already knew. No expert knows everything about every place, not even anything about any place. If one's knowledge of one's whereabouts is insufficient, if one's judgment is unsound, then expert advice is of little use. In many ways, the last two ideas summarize what this class is about: the trouble of having too little knowledge and the limitations of the knowledge we do have. Increasing your research literacy will not only help add to your knowledge, but also help you recognize the limitations of information and knowledge from various sources. So what is research literacy? You might think of literacy as referring to the ability to read and write. The title of this class and the use of the term is based on a little different definition, though: knowledge of a particular subject. The book we'll use for this class focuses on what the authors refer to as scientific literacy, and we can think of that as being pretty much synonymous with research literacy. One of the things the book mentions is that scientific literacy is not the same as science literacy, though sometimes they get confused. That's part of the reason this class is called research literacy instead of scientific literacy. The other definitions included in this slide are from articles about research literacy in medicine, and they expand on the ideas in the first definition to give more of a sense of what we'll be learning about. The authors of our book conclude the book by saying, scientific literacy is not just about what we know, it's about how we know it and how we conduct our lives. That brings together all of the ideas from the other definitions. The ability to access, interpret, and evaluate research is the what we know. The research process, how scientists work, is how we know it. And the logic of research includes cognitive and social understanding of its purpose and its value, which influence how we conduct our lives. So, what does it mean to be scientifically literate or to have research literacy? Like many things, it's a continuum. You probably have some research literacy right now, given what you've learned in high school and your other college classes. So the goal of this class is to increase that level of literacy. This is just the first step, though. You'll continue to add to your research literacy in other research methods classes and in each of your psychology classes. While there isn't an established test or measure of scientific literacy, the readings for this module do explain several characteristics. I'll highlight 3 of those here to help you get started identifying them. One of the characteristics is being able to be open to new ideas and explanations, a willingness to change one's mind when it's warranted. Another characteristic of someone who's scientifically literate is that they realize most of the topics we deal with in psychology and in life are complex, so the answers or solutions aren't always going to be simple. Building on that, someone who's scientifically literate also understands that a single study is just that, one study. Given the complexity of topics, a scientifically literate person knows the understanding requires a body of work. The book suggests the metaphor of a jigsaw puzzle. Each study is a piece, but one piece doesn't help us see the bigger picture being created. Okay, but why are you required to take an entire class about research literacy? One reason is because it helps you understand what the discipline of psychology really is. It's defined as a science, and each of the professional organizations refer to science in their mission statements. They also host conferences so that scholars can present research and theories. It might seem a little backwards, but another reason that research literacy is especially important in psychology is because everyone is familiar with the topics in psychology. We all behave and we all have mental processes. That can lead to overconfidence about inaccurate beliefs, though. It can also lead people to stop at the most obvious and simple explanation, preventing discoveries about the more complex dynamics. The things that seem like common sense also aren't always the same from person to person, and they're not always accurate. For example, I have a feeling you've heard people say opposites attract when they're talking about relationships, but you've probably also heard birds of a feather flock together. Understanding research helps us figure out what's more likely to be the case. Or, as one author explained it, progress in psychology happens when someone finds a clever way to test those common sense ideas. As a side note, you might have noticed I said we try to figure out what's more likely to be the case. I added a disclaimer of sorts because we're learning about people, and one thing we've learned is that there's always the possibility for something to be different for a person or for a group. Oh, and the opposites or birds of a feather? Social psychology research supports the idea that birds of a feather flock together. In other words, we tend to interact with people who are like us. Research literacy is also important because the information that appears to be scientific might not actually be based on the same standards as science. The book refers to that unscientific information as pseudoscience. From the scientific perspective, we generate knowledge through objective, data-based processes that can be confirmed or verified by others. That also includes reporting results publicly so they can be scrutinized. Pseudoscientific knowledge might appear scientific at first glance. The way it's presented might seem similar to knowledge based on scientific processes. With further inspection, though, we realize it's not objective or not based on empirical data, or both. It might also be based on a process that can't be recreated, so it can't be verified. Along those lines, it also would be pseudoscience if the emphasis is on a particular piece of information and the implications, without reporting on the process by which it's based and on in a way that allows others to question it. The phrase "a wolf in sheep's clothing" comes to mind when I think about some of the characteristics of pseudoscience. I have to stretch a little bit to use the sheep as a metaphor for science, but it does generally represent all the characteristics of science. The possibility that information is pseudoscience is only one part of the reason we need to be educated consumers of information, though. In some cases, the information that might appear to be objective news isn't, though there are a lot more reasons that's the case than just the political associations we might have with the term fake news. Regardless of the intention, I think we can actually make a case that the information we would label as fake news is also only a small part of the reason we need to be educated information consumers. Reporting about legitimate studies can be misleading when the writers don't understand research or when editors focus on sensational headlines. Social media platforms include paid content that attempts to influence our behavior, often our spending behavior. The last chapter of the text gives several other examples of situations where research literacy is helpful, providing a reminder of the cost of not having high levels of research literacy. In some cases, it's a financial cost, but that's almost the best case scenario. When we're making decisions about medical treatment or work-related issues, research literacy can save a great deal of stress. So when it comes down to it, this class is about the power of knowledge and how you can increase your power to turn information into knowledge. We call that power research literacy. and it includes knowing how to find, interpret, and evaluate research, as well as understanding the purpose and the value of research. Research methods are the process for gathering scientific knowledge and the foundation for scientific literacy. When you increase your powers for scientific literacy and research literacy, you'll understand topics in psychology in new ways. Perhaps more importantly, you can save yourself and others a lot of time, money, and stress. Side note, one of the things you'll learn in this module is that part of scientific literacy is asking about the sources of data. When we're talking about research studies, that means the researchers share their methods and the results. In other contexts, that means we share the source of the ideas. Giving credit is also important for academic integrity. You might have noticed that some of the information in the slides had citations, the names, dates, and page numbers in parentheses. This is the rest of the information about those sources, so you can find the original source if you'd like. I'll include this information in all of the recordings, and there's also a references page for the course readings and assignments on the About This Course page of the Start Here module.